When peace feels unfamiliar, restoration begins here. This is P.I.P.E Podcast. I watched my daughter become free this week. Not because her circumstances changed, and not because all of the problems disappeared. Not because someone came along and fixed everything. She became free because she finally told the truth. And as I watched her get lighter, I realized something. Generational pain isn't just carried through what happens to us. It's carried through the secrets we keep, through the silence, through the shame, through the things nobody feels safe enough to say out loud. And this week, as I watch my daughter find freedom, telling the truth, I started thinking about my own life. The secrets I've carried, the things I was afraid to say, the things my mother carried, the things I now see my children carrying. And I realize something I can't stop thinking about. Cycles don't survive because people are bad. Cycles survive because nobody feels safe enough to tell the truth. Welcome back to P.I.P.E Podcast. I'm Kezia. And honestly, this has been a heavy week. Not because of one conversation, not because of one situation, but because several things happened all at once. And together, they forced me to see something I wasn't expecting. A pattern. Not a pattern in one relationship. Not a pattern in one season of life. A pattern that stretches across generations. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And this week, I received a letter from one of my daughters. I had difficult conversations with my children. I had a painful conversation that left me feeling unseen, misunderstood. I found myself reflecting on my marriage, my divorce, my childhood, my mother, and all of the women in my family. And somehow all of these completely different situations pointed me toward the same realization. I don't think generational pain is carried only through what happens to us. I think it's carried through what we don't talk about. The secrets, the silence, the shame, the things nobody feels safe enough to say out loud. One of the most powerful moments this week happened with my daughter. She told me something she's been carrying. And honestly, what struck me wasn't the thing itself. It was what happened after. She got lighter. She wanted to keep talking. She wanted to tell me more, not less, more. And I realized she wasn't looking for punishment. She wasn't looking for judgment. She wasn't looking for someone to tell her everything she did wrong. She wanted to know she was still loved. She wanted to know she was still safe. She wanted to know I wasn't going to leave. And I remember looking at her and saying, "I'm so glad you told me." Not because I was happy she was hurting, but because now I could see her correctly. Now I could begin to understand her correctly. Now I could protect her correctly. I could love her correctly. I could stop making assumptions about her behavior and start understanding what was underneath it. And as I watched her get lighter, I had a realization. The secret wasn't the burden. Carrying it alone was. I think that's what I've been grieving this week. Not just what happened, but how many people I love have carried things alone because they were afraid of what would happen if they told the truth. My mother, me, my daughters. Different stories, with the same fear. What if people knew and stopped loving me? And suddenly, I started seeing my own life differently. Years ago, there was something I carried that I was deeply ashamed of. I carried it because I had already decided what would happen if someone knew. I had already written the ending. I had already convinced myself I knew how they would respond. So I carried it, and carried it, and carried it. Then the day I finally told Darius, his response was not what I was expecting. He didn't shame me. He didn't reject me. He didn't condemn me. He looked at me and said, "I wish you would have told me. I would have been there. I would have helped you through it." And I remember feeling relief. Not because the past changed, but because I wasn't carrying it by myself anymore. This week made me realize how many decisions get made from fear before the truth is ever spoken. How many years get spent carrying things that were never meant to be carried alone. And then I started thinking about my own mother. Her story is different than mine. My story is different than my daughter's. The details are different. The circumstances are different. But the theme, it felt familiar. Women carrying pain in silence. Women carrying shame that wasn't theirs. Women believing they had to survive things alone. Women believing they had to protect everyone else while carrying impossible burdens themselves. That's when it hit me. Cycles rarely repeat exactly. The details change. The faces change. The generation changes. But the message stays the same. This week, I wasn't looking at isolated events anymore. I was looking at generations. And inside of me, I finally said, no more. Not because I have all the answers. And I don't exactly know what to do with it. But I can finally see it. And what we can see, we can challenge. What we can name, we can address. What we bring into the light no longer has the same power over us. One of the hardest realizations this week came from looking back at my own life. I had a difficult conversation with my ex-husband, and if I'm honest, it forced me to look at things I didn't want to look at. Because one of the hardest truths about healing is realizing that sometimes we can be inside a cycle and not fully see it. I look back now and I see things differently than I did then. Not because I wasn't trying. Not because I didn't love my children. Not because I didn't care. Because when you're living inside a pattern, sometimes it just feels like the norm. One of the hardest parts about growth is looking back and realizing what you couldn't see then, that you can see now. That realization really hurts. Because every parent wishes they could go back and do certain things differently. Every parent wishes they could protect their children from every hurt. And there have absolutely been moments this week where I've had to wrestle with that. Moments where I thought, how did I not see that? How did I not understand that? Could I have protected them better? Could I have responded differently? Those are really hard questions. But healing isn't pretending we got everything right. Healing is being willing to tell the truth about what we see now. And maybe that's another way cycles begin to break. Not through perfection, through honesty. This week, I also found myself in a conversation that left me feeling something I haven't wanted to admit. Rejected. I felt so misunderstood. Not fully accepted. And as I sat with those feelings, I realized something. I've spent a lot of my life trying to earn acceptance from people who have already decided who I am. Maybe you've done that too. Trying to explain yourself. Trying to prove your heart. Trying to get people to see you. Trying to convince them that you're not the problem that they think you are. Trying to earn love that should have been freely given. And this week I had to ask myself a hard question. What if healing isn't convincing everyone to understand me? What if healing is knowing who I am, even when they don't? Because the truth is, some people will never see us clearly. It's not because we're unworthy. It's because they're looking through their own wounds, their own disappointments, their own fears, their own beliefs. And if we spend our lives trying to earn acceptance from people, who've already decided who we are, we'll stay exhausted forever. But maybe freedom looks like something else. Maybe freedom looks like telling the truth. Maybe freedom looks like putting down the shame. Maybe freedom looks like refusing to carry what was never ours. Maybe freedom looks like being fully known and discovering that we're still loved. Because that's what I saw in my daughter. That's what I experienced with Darius. And honestly, that's what I'm learning myself. I used to think the cycle was the abuse. I used to think the cycle was the divorce. I used to think the cycle was the rejection. I used to think the cycle was the pain. Now, I think the cycle was also the silence, the shame, the secrets, the belief if people knew the truth, they would leave. But this week, I watched what happened when the truth was spoken. Instead of rejection, there was connection. Instead of shame, there was understanding. Instead of isolation, there was love. And maybe that's how cycles finally break. Not because nobody will ever get hurt again, or life will become suddenly easy, but because someone finally tells the truth. Someone finally speaks. Someone finally says, "This happened. This hurt. I'm struggling. I'm afraid. I need help." And instead of being met with judgment, they are met with love. Maybe that's where healing begins. Maybe that's where generational pain finally starts losing its power. Not in hiding, in truth. Not in isolation, in connection. Not in shame, but in love. And maybe that's the question I want to leave you with today. What are you carrying that was never meant to be carried alone? Because maybe the thing you're most afraid to say is the very thing that will finally set you free. Thank you for sitting with me today. This is P.I.P.E. Plug into positive energy, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for sitting with us today, where restoration begins.